In today's video, I'm excited to show you the inner workings of a hand-welted pair of shoes.
I'm Kirby Allison, and I love helping the well-dressed acquire and care for their wardrobes. Join me as we explore the world of quality, craftsmanship, and tradition.
We all know that Goodyear welting is the gold standard of high-quality leather dress shoes. The Goodyear welt allows a shoe to be resoled over and over and thereby extending its lifetime. But before modernization and machines introduced the Goodyear welting, shoes were hand-welted. This is an element of craftsmanship and quality, traditionally now only found on bespoke shoes and very select ready-to-wear lines of shoes. I'm excited today to have a full range of Stefano Bemer shoes here with me, one of the few ready-to-wear makers out there still hand-welting shoes. And we've got shoes at various stages, and so I'm going to be able to show you the inner workings of a hand-welted pair of shoes and what that looks like. Stefano Bemer is a very well-known and famous Italian shoemaker focusing on heritage and quality. Based in Florence, they're well known for their hand-welting ready-to-wear shoes, one of the few makers, probably less than 5, around in the world where you can get a hand-welted pair of shoes that isn't bespoke. Now, the reason that you would want hand-welting is that you still get the quality and the craftsmanship of a bespoke shoe, but for a fraction of the price of what you normally pay for full bespoke. Now, what is the difference between a hand-welted, ready-to-wear pair of shoes and a hand-welted bespoke shoe? Well, for really all intents and purposes, it's just the absence of a personalized hand-carved last. Now, with Stefano Bemer, their Tradizione line, which retails for around $2,000 US, has all of the same make characteristics of a bespoke shoe, but just doesn't have that bespoke last. So if you're really into the quality and the craftsmanship of the construction, but don't want to stretch up to full bespoke, or if their stock last fits you perfectly, then you can still enjoy all of the benefits and elements of quality and craftsmanship of a bespoke shoe for a fraction of the price. Now, the challenge that I've had with really describing the essence of a hand-welted pair of shoes is that by the time I receive one of my bespoke shoes, the bottoms are finished and you can't look inside to see how that hand-welting is actually done. But today I've got 5 different models from Stefano Bemer, each representing a different stage of that hand-welting process, and I'm excited to speak through each of these with you. So here on the right, we have our first pair. Now this shows you a shoe that has been fully lasted around the last. So that means that this upper has been sewn together and then pulled over the last, and that's what begins to give the shoe its shape. You can see that with Stefano Bemer, you've got incredible arch support here. Again, one of those hallmarks of quality that you find on bespoke shoes or hand-lasted shoes. And so this arch support right here is going to be what cups the foot and gives you great support. First, you see that the insole has been shaped to the bottom of the last and then nailed to the last. So this piece of leather right here is the actual insole that you would slide your foot on top of on the inside of the shoe. And then you have the upper, which is comprised of 3 different layers. You have the interlining, which you can see right here, which again is that interior sock of the shoe. And then you would have any hard countering, which are the hard pieces of leather that are inserted in between the interlining and the upper. And then finally you have this upper. So there's 3 pieces of leather here that's being pulled over the last. So as the shoemaker is pulling that upper over the last, he's nailing it or tacking it into the last. And so that's what's holding this upper in place. These nails are actually going all the way through the leather into the last itself. And it's for that reason that if you turn upside down or if you turn over a bespoke last, you always see a row of nails kind of in and around the perimeter, and that's these nails right here that's kind of holding this all together. Now this is an incredibly important step because 1, it's controlling kind of where the upper is sitting on the last. How it's being pulled over, again, is what's giving that shape and that last definition to the upper itself. And all this is being done on top of the wooden block, the last that is representing the shape of your foot. So after the shoe has been lasted, most shoemakers allow this to sit on the upper for several days, even a week. And again, the longer you leave the leather lasted over the last, the more it's able to memorize the shape of the last itself. Next, what you see is that a channel is being carved out on the interior of the insole, and you can kind of see that right here where that's being carved out by hand. And then the shoemaker begins to hand welt the shoe. The hand welting is where a leather strip is attached to the bottom of the shoe. Now what this leather strip is doing is it's basically attaching or connecting together and holding together the upper, the hard countering, the interlining to the outsole. This is the spine or the backbone, the integrity of the shoe that is holding all these pieces together. Now the benefit of a hand-welted shoe or the more modern Goodyear welting shoe is that the outsole is then sewn on top of the welt, which allows that outsole to be pulled off and re-sewn back onto the shoe without disturbing any of the work that's been put in to the fit of the upper and the insole itself. So you can re-sole the shoe without affecting any of the integrity of the shoe itself. Now this is being done by hand, right? So on a modern factory-made shoe, there's a machine that does this with a linen rib. What's really special about a hand-welted pair of shoes is that this is being done totally by hand with two strings of linen twine. This is being sewn together with an interlocking method so that even if one of these stitches were to break, the entire integrity of this line is still upheld and the shoe will hold together. Now, one of the benefits of a hand-welted shoe, again, is the additional flexibility, the strength, the durability. But one of the other things I like is it allows this interior channel between the insole and the outsole to be as thin and as narrow as possible. Now we're only talking millimeters here, but on a Goodyear welted pair of shoes, because a linen rib is glued to the insole and then stitched to the upper, the space on the interior chamber of that shoe is larger. So this welt is sewn all the way around, and on most really high quality shoes, the welt would end right here at the heel, so that the heel base can really sit on tightly and not show any of the welting. But you can see how beautifully this is done, again, almost all the way through completion here. And very rarely are you able to see a shoe kind of at this intermediate stage. Now, once the shoe has been welted, right, all the way around, then what you have is the interior chamber, right? This void right here is then filled with corking, or in this case, you can see that it's being filled kind of with additional leather. So what this does is it just fills that chamber, provides a little bit of additional cushion. Every shoemaker has different methods. Some use cork. Some of the British makers use wool felting that is more waterproof. And then here with Stefano Bemer, you see that it's being finished off with a nice layer of leather. Now you see again, they're beginning to build the shape of the waist here, and then they've got additional work that's going in right here that's creating this really strong fiddleback, right? So after the bottom has been prepared, evened out, this waist has been shaped, then for the next stage, what you have is actually adding the outsole to the shoe itself. So the outsole is prepared, depending on the maker, it's pounded by a hammer, to further compress the pore structure, because again, this is what is making contact with the ground. You want this to be as waterproof and as durable as possible. And then the outsole is sewn to the welt. That is what's attaching the outsole to the welt. Now on a traditional factory-made Goodyear welted pair of shoe, this is done by machine very quickly, but with a beautiful handmade pair of shoes like these Stefano Bemers, the outsole is also being sewn onto the welt by hand. Now this is being done by hand, again, with additional linen threads, and you can see that they're doing it with an invisible channel stitching where they carve into the actual outsole, peel it back, and then they're sewing it through the outsole to the welt, right? And where those stitches would go is being marked by the fudging or the wheel that is marking those indentations. And this is being done at a very high stitch density. So, really common factory-made Goodyear welted pair of shoes, might have 4 or 5 stitches per inch. This is approaching 12. So again, you're getting a level of finesse in there also. Now, interestingly enough, you would think that the higher the stitch density, the stronger, more durable the shoe is, but it's actually the opposite. The higher the stitch density, the more finesse and the more finely finished the shoe is. But actually, because you have to use thinner pieces of linen twine, most shoemakers prefer to reduce the stitch density for boots or country boots. So like a derby or a derby, a country boot would actually have a lower stitch density but a thicker thread than a city shoe or an Oxford like what we have right here. So the outsole is being sewn onto the welt, and then what would happen is what we see right here, where it's open, but then on this side you can see that that is glued back down and really pressed with the wheel, so you have a nice smooth finish. You see that there's additional shape being put into the waist, and then on the back of the shoe, where there's no welt to sew this through, wooden pegs are pegging that outsole into the bottom of the shoe. And then finally, we take it to completion, where you see a beautiful finished pair of the Stefano Bemers. This is why Stefano Bemer is really so famous. This is their highest end, ready-to-wear collection, or made-to-order, as most of them are, $2,000, but really totally bespoke in terms of the level of finishing, everything but the last. And you see, look at these bottoms. You've got this beautiful, tight, narrow waist. You've got the bevel. It's beautifully finished with the invisible channel stitching. You see that the heel sits beautifully, or the heel block sits beautifully underneath the heel. You've got great shape to the last, again, because this has been fully lasted by hand. I mean, even look how it comes out right here. And then beautiful arch support that's cupping underneath the foot. And you just have a beautiful shape and sculpture to the shoe that's being hand-lasted and hand-welted that you just don't normally find in a factory-made, a Goodyear welted shoe, just because of the modernization and the way that a factory-made shoe is made. And one of the things that I just love about shoemaking, especially bespoke or hand-welted pair of shoes, is just the idea that you can buy a pair of shoes today in 2019 that's being sewn together by hand using the same methods that have been unchanged for almost 2 centuries. And I just love that element of quality, the craftsmanship and tradition with a hand-welted pair of shoes that you don't find with a factory-made pair of shoes. And the reality is that outside of bespoke, there's just not very many makers doing a ready-to-wear or made-to-order pair of shoes with a hand-welted construction that isn't full bespoke. And Stefano Bemer is one of the few offering this level of quality to their ready-to-wear or made-to-order customers. Now, you may ask at the end of the day, does a hand-welted shoe feel different than a ready-to-wear, a Goodyear welted factory-made shoe? And I think that the answer is, after having worn bespoke shoes, for almost 10 years now, is really an unequivocally yes. Now, it's a very nuanced difference that is hard to describe, and I think that the essence really comes down to the amount of space in this interior channel. Because there's no linen ribbing that's being glued to the insole that is then being used to attach these other parts of the upper to, you're able to end up with a much thinner channel or compartment right here on a hand-welted pair of shoes than you are with a Goodyear factory-made pair of shoes. Now, the difference is really hard to describe, and it's something that you can only really feel whenever you're wearing the shoes, and that's on a hand-welted pair of shoes. You're standing closer to the ground than you would on an equivalent Goodyear welted pair of shoes. And the difference is that a hand-welted pair of shoes just enjoys a degree of flexibility and agility to it that you don't get with the factory-made Goodyear welted pair of shoes. And I liken the difference between driving, a BMW M3, which is still a really great sports car, and like a Ferrari, right? Both are incredible cars. Both are, really sporty and really fast. But there is a nuanced difference that you experience with a true sports car like a Ferrari that sits closer to the ground, is a little bit more responsive. You feel the road more. I feel that with a beautiful hand-welted pair of shoes, you just have that extra level of refinement, above the M3 all the way to that Ferrari. And whenever I'm walking around in a pair of my bespoke shoes, there's no question that I just feel attached to the ground differently than if I'm walking with a factory-made Goodyear welted pair of shoes. Now, at the end of the day, they're both shoes, and you can find absolutely beautiful Goodyear welted shoes. But if you're someone that's really into just the nostalgia of beautiful handmade shoes, those small nuanced differences do make a difference. There's one more analogy that I'll say to again help explain the difference between a hand-welted pair of shoes and a Goodyear welted factory-made pair of shoes. And again, because there's so much less space on this interior channel that you're feeling more connected to the ground, it's kind of like walking barefoot on a silk Persian rug versus a shag carpet. It just feels tighter, it feels cleaner. The shoe is really cupping your foot. There should be no excess room. You've got great support, through the arch, the hard countering, through the heel. It's just a completely different feel, and it's something that until you experience it, it's really hard to understand or relate to. But there is a reason that people say that once you go for a bespoke pair of shoes or a really high quality pair of shoes like these Stefano Bemers, hand lasted, hand welted, totally hand finished, that it's difficult to go back. Because whenever you slip a pair of shoes like this on your feet, there's no question they feel incredible. They're super comfortable, and throughout the day, your feet become less fatigued and tired. And again, Stefano Bemer has a great offer of their MTO hand-welted shoes that just isn't common out there. So it was really nice of them to send us these shoes, and it's fun to be able to kind of look at the interior workings of the shoe, at various different stages of the make to really kind of show you the difference that you get with a hand-welted pair of shoes. Now we have a full series that we're going to be filming on Stefano Bemer. We're going to be reviewing several of their different collections. They've got 3 different ranges. It's the Essenziale, which is again Goodyear welted, right under $1,000. They have their Classica, which is again factory made, right around $1,400. And then their top of the line, which is the Tradizione, which again is fully handmade, really made just like a bespoke pair of shoes without the bespoke last. And this retails here in America for approximately $2,000. It's fun to kind of take a look at the interior workings of a hand-welted pair of shoes. So again, if you have any questions or comments, please let us know in the comments section below. Watch out for the full series of videos that we're going to be filming on Stefano Bemer. And if you haven't taken a moment to visit KirbyAllison.com, we've got the largest collection of luxury garment care, luxury shoe care, and other luxury clothing accessories in the world. I'm Kirby Allison, and I love to help the well-dressed acquire and care for their wardrobes while exploring the world of quality, craftsmanship, and tradition. Thanks for joining me.